Welcome to the Chapter 5 video. In Chapters 4 and 5, your book describes a specific process for brainstorming, organizing, and outlining ideas. For some people, this process is extremely helpful and it allows them to write much more clearly than they ever did before. Some people, however, might find this process too rigid or feel like it stifles their creativity. And some might ask, why do we need to do this at all? Why not just write? So in this lecture, we're going to take a look at a few paragraphs that are not organized, and we're going to look at some strategies for making them better. You might find that this process works better for you if you're the kind of person who likes to get all their ideas out there first and organize them afterwards. The main problem that most of us have in organizing our writing, or any kind of communicating for that matter, is that our minds tend to work by a process of random associations rather than in a linear structure. We see this in conversation all the time, right? When someone says, "Speaking of dogs, my Uncle Schnauzer Fifi does such and such." And the next person says, "Oh, well, speaking of uncles," and they go on from there. Usually to the writer, their own thought process is perfectly clear. So we have to train ourselves to make the connections that are obvious in our own minds clear to our readers as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first paragraph. Okay, so here's our first paragraph. Now, it's not terrible. The ideas are all loosely related, but it's not a very focused paragraph because it's not making a single unified point. Let's read through it. America has lost track of the true value of time. Children seem to understand its value, while adults waste their time on HBO rather than teaching respect, family, and moral issues. Families don't get together anymore like they used to, partly because both parents have to work just to survive nowadays. So who is teaching, supporting, and loving our children? Breaking this into its different claims, let's see what this writer is trying to say here. The first sentence is about time. We've lost track of its true value. Now, to the writer, this obviously makes sense. But as a reader, I wonder, what is the true value of time according to this person? How should we be spending our time? In the second sentence, the writer assumes that we do understand time's true value, that we know what value is, and that parents should be teaching family values during their time. Now, what are the children doing? Is the part about HBO really necessary here? Or is it just that adults are doing something else, anything else, other than teaching respect, family, and moral issues? It seems to me like perhaps the HBO is just distracting from this point. In the third sentence, we have a new issue, which is, are families spending enough time together? And the thing that's being blamed here now isn't the TV anymore, but suddenly parents working. And in the fourth sentence, we have a question: who is teaching, supporting, and loving our children? But no answer. The implied answer, of course, is no one is, and that's bad. Teaching, supporting, and loving children is the lack that the writer wants to solve. And then also notice that in the final sentence, the question of time is completely forgotten. They've left that concept behind and moved on to something new. All right, let's try outlining the paragraph. Let's break it into a few different points or phrases. Oops. Here we have the value of time is what the first sentence is wanting to look at. Parents not teaching respect is the second sentence. Families not spending time together is a shortened version of the third sentence. And no one supporting the kids is the implied part of the fourth sentence. Now, if we look at each of these ideas separately, it becomes clear that the entire paragraph is not really about time per se. Time is not really the main point, but instead maybe the main point is something about kids being neglected or not given enough parental attention. So this idea should not be at the top of this paragraph because it doesn't express the main point of the whole thing. Pause this video for a minute and write down or jot down on a piece of paper what you think might be a better main idea for the supporting points that follow. All right, if you have that done, let's take a look at one possibility that I've come up with. How about something like, today's families are dysfunctional? This is a very simplified sentence. Perhaps the final sentence, when you rewrote the entire paragraph, might be longer or more complex. But at least this sentence is a general statement about families that covers all of the problems in the supporting points. Another thing to think about or to ask yourself as a writer is whether your supporting points are in the best possible order. Typically, the third or final point is seen as being the most powerful position in the paragraph. So you should put your best or most dramatic point there. Maybe in this case, no one supporting the kids could stay as the final point. That is a pretty powerful sentence. But I would maybe think about switching these two. That way, the parents' roles are together here, and then the family's not spending time together sort of sets up these two ideas. Now, as you know from your textbook, one important thing that this paragraph is missing is examples or supporting details. So let's brainstorm for a moment about what kinds of supporting details this writer could include. Again, pause the video for a second, think over each point, and what kinds of supporting details or anecdotes or examples would you give for each of these sub-points. Here are a couple of options. If it's a personal essay, the author might give an example from his or her own family or a family she knows, like in this first option, I was a latchkey kid. If it's a more formal research paper, then the author needs to prove with hard evidence from trustworthy sources that families are not spending time together. In a research paper, personal examples, while interesting, are not adequate to support an argument point like that. You'd have to give evidence that adults are in fact working more hours, or perhaps something about families having TVs in every bedroom, which would imply that they're not spending time even watching television together. When you're coming up with supporting details, one of the things you want to be answering is the question why, and also the question how do you know? Here, the author could try to explain why parents aren't teaching their kids respect with this argument, saying Generation X parents care too much about their kids' self-esteem and not enough about their obedience or something like that. Or you could offer proof or evidence that they aren't teaching respect by arguing that the parents can't see their own kids' faults, perhaps with some evidence from your own experience or whatever. Personal essay, anecdotal evidence is sufficient. For research, you need facts and sources. And you can imagine something similar for supporting point 3. Does this make sense? For some people, outlining after the fact is easier, but of course, you'd have to then go back and rewrite the whole paragraph. So it's not necessarily less work to do your outline as a second step and your draft work, writing the first draft as a first step. All right, ready to try again? Let's look at a new paragraph. This one comes from a writing handbook that I sometimes use, and it's a paragraph about casinos. Bringing casino gaming to Massachusetts would benefit the state in a number of ways. First, it would provide needed property tax relief for many of the state's towns and cities. Casino gaming would also bring in revenue needed to fix the state's roads and bridges. The Speaker of the House of Representatives is blocking the governor's proposal because he believes the social costs are greater than the economic benefits. Many people agree with the Speaker. Most importantly, casino gaming would provide jobs in areas of the state that have suffered economically in recent years. All right, this paragraph certainly is more academic sounding than the first one that we read, but it too has some problems in terms of organization. Pause this video for a moment and see if you can pinpoint the place where this paragraph sort of goes off the rails, takes a rabbit trail, and where does it return to the main argument. Let's take a look at the first sentence. The first sentence here does state the main idea, that casino gaming would benefit the state in a number of ways. Then, sentence 2 gives a reason why it would benefit the state. Sentence 3 gives a reason why it would benefit the state. And the final sentence gives a reason why it would benefit the state. So the question is then, what do sentences 4 and 5 do? Think about that for a moment. Sentences 4 and 5 in this paragraph provide a counter-argument, a reason why the proposal may not pass. It is a relevant point to the larger essay. We need to think about this if we're going to, make a decision about whether casino gaming in Massachusetts is a good idea. But it doesn't belong in this paragraph. Perhaps the writer might create a new paragraph or put it somewhere else in the essay. If the writer decides to take this out, completely cut it, then obviously move this up to as the fourth sentence of the paragraph. Then they've got a paragraph that's very unified. Perhaps they might want to think about a final kind of closing statement in the paragraph, but that's optional. All right, last one. The United States of America is one of many countries in the world that were created by immigration. The essential characteristic is perhaps America's greatest weakness and its greatest strength. This country has the potential to be swallowed up by the diverse beliefs, values, and social practices of its immigrants so that nothing is in common to anyone. America can benefit from embracing the amazing cultural diversity within itself. Read through this paragraph again on your own after pausing this video and ask yourself what might be confusing about this paragraph to a reader. One of the things that we can do to help make this a better paragraph is first to recognize that it is a contrast paragraph. It wants us to look at the pros and the cons of immigration. When you write a contrast paragraph or some other of the complex paragraphs or essay forms that we'll learn about later, it's important to provide transitions so that the reader can understand what you're doing. Here, the first sentence serves as a kind of setup. The second sentence is really the main idea, that immigration is America's greatest weakness and its greatest strength. And then sentence 3 elaborates on the concept of greatest weakness. Sentence 4 elaborates on greatest strength. But as a reader, and when I first read the paragraph, I felt confused about the question of whether this author even supports immigration or not. What side are they on? So it would be really helpful for this author if they could be more clear by hanging signposts on their writing to indicate how their ideas relate to each other. Here, I've added a sentence that links the idea of immigration with something that is clearly a weakness. So I've said, on the one hand, a transitional phrase, immigration could undermine the country's unity. The U.S. might be swallowed up by the diverse beliefs, values, and social practices. So now we need something that will indicate clearly that they mean that they're telling us that diversity is a strength. And so here's what I've added to help the reader understand that concept a little better. On the other hand, so this provides my contrast phrase, on the one hand, on the other hand. Immigration brings amazing cultural diversity, which develops America's educational, social, and scientific capital. This would be one option. The author has to sit and think about why exactly cultural diversity is a good thing in order to come up with the rest of this sentence. It makes the author do a little bit more work. But on the other hand, I think it adds more complex content to the paragraph as well. Now, you might also have noticed that I took out the part about embracing cultural diversity, that word in particular. Since this paragraph would benefit from a kind of summing up sentence at the end, I might try putting that back in with its own sentence. Like maybe at the end of the paragraph, I might add, America should embrace its special identity as a nation of immigrants, and so on. And that would also help my reader understand where I land, pro or con, so to speak, at the end of this paragraph. It helps them see my point of view. As you can see, organization requires the ability to zoom in, sentence by sentence, as well as to zoom out and see the entire piece of writing as a whole. Sometimes if you write first and organize later, you'll find yourself cutting out large pieces of your writing and rewriting large parts of your essay. And that's fine, but you do have to leave yourself time to make those revisions. I think you'll agree we've radically improved all the paragraphs we looked at by thinking carefully about what the main point is, where the supporting points need to go, what order they should be in, what kinds of evidence and examples and details we can add to support those main arguments. So take a moment here at the end of this video, make a few notes to yourself about what you've learned here about organization, things to remember as you begin writing your own essay over the next couple of weeks.